Imagine a world without cities, roads, or even fire. A world where every shadow hides a predator, where survival isn't guaranteed, it's earned. This is Earth, 4.7 million years ago. And this is how our ancestors defied extinction. The sun rose over a land untouched by time. Thick forests stretched endlessly, their canopies hiding creatures long forgotten. In this world, our ancestors weren't kings, they were prey. Australopithecus, small and hair-covered, moved cautiously through the grass. Their bodies weren't built for strength, but their minds? Those were different. A rustle in the bushes. The group froze. Eyes darted. Was it the leopard again? Last week, it took one of the young. But today they were lucky. The predator slunk away, unsatisfied. The troop let out shaky breaths and moved on. Survival here wasn't about bravery. It was about patience. They reached a clearing where berries grew. One by one, they picked, fingers clumsy but learning. A sharp cry echoed, a warning. From the trees, Dinofelis, a saber-toothed cat, stared hungrily. The troop scrambled. Some dropped their food. Others climbed. The cat snarled but left, this time. Night fell fast. With no fire, darkness meant danger. They huddled in the trees, gripping branches as hyenas laughed below. Tomorrow would be another fight. But for now, they survived. The dry wind howled across the cracked earth, carrying the scent of death. A pack of Dinofelis, saber-toothed cats with dagger-like fangs, prowled near the remains of a fallen Dinotherium, a massive elephant-like beast. The carcass was picked clean by vultures, but the bones still held precious marrow. The lead cat, a scarred male, growled as he crunched through bone, his yellow eyes scanning for threats. Then, the ground trembled. From the horizon, a shadow moved, slow, deliberate. A Meganterian, another type of saber-tooth, but bulkier, its muscles rippling under its striped fur. It wasn't alone. Two more followed, their low rumbles vibrating through the air. The Dinofelis pack tensed. This wasn't just a fight for food, it was a fight for territory. The Meganterian leader charged without warning. Claws slashed, fangs snapped. One Dinofelis yelped as teeth sank into its leg, dragging it down. The others lunged, hissing, swiping, but the Meganterian were stronger. Within minutes, the Dinofelis fled, leaving their meal behind. But the victors didn't feast for long. A new sound cut through the growls, a deep, rhythmic thud. The cats froze. The bushes rustled. Then, silence. Too silent. Even the insects had stopped chirping. A pair of glowing eyes emerged from the tall grass. Then another. And another. Homotherium. The scimitar-toothed cats. Faster. Deadlier. And they didn't come to share. The Meganterian snarled, backing into a defensive circle. The Homotherium didn't attack immediately. They stalked, tightening the noose. One false move, and the ambush would begin. Then, a distant roar shook the trees. Something big was coming. The Homotherium hesitated. The Meganterian seized the moment and bolted, abandoning the carcass. The scimitar cats let them go. Their ears twitched, listening. The roar came again, closer this time. Whatever was coming, it was worse. The Homotherium stood frozen, their muscles coiled like springs. The distant roar had turned into a deep, guttural vibration. Something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world anymore. The air grew thick with the scent of wet soil and rotting vegetation. Then, the ground moved. At first, it was just a tremor, a slight shift under their paws. Then, the earth split. A monstrous shape erupted from the ground in an explosion of dirt and roots. The Homotherium stumbled back, hissing. What emerged wasn't a cat, nor any predator they knew. It was Megatherium, a giant ground sloth, towering over them like a living mountain. Its claws were as long as a lion's fangs, its fur matted with mud and old scars. This creature wasn't supposed to be here. Not now. The sloth's tiny eyes locked onto the cats. It wasn't afraid. It was angry. One Homotherium, younger and reckless, lunged. Its teeth aimed for the sloth's throat, but it never made contact. A single swipe of the Megatherium's claw sent the cat flying, its ribs crushed. The others backed away, ears flat. This wasn't prey. This was death itself. Then, the sloth did something unexpected. Instead of attacking, it turned and dug. Its massive claws tore into the earth like shovels, revealing something beneath the soil, bones. Not fresh ones. Old. Very old. The skull of a creature none of the cats recognized, with jagged teeth and hollow eye sockets. The sloth sniffed it, then let out a mournful groan. Something about this place was wrong. The Homotherium didn't wait to find out. They fled, tails low. The Megatherium watched them go, then returned to its digging. It wasn't hunting. It was searching. And then, a new sound. Not a roar. Not a growl. A clicking. From the shadows of the trees, dozens of glowing eyes flickered to life. Small, fast shapes darted between the roots. At first, they looked like rats. Then one stepped into the moonlight. Giant, venomous, and hungry. The clicking grew louder, a relentless chorus that made the very air vibrate. The Megatherium stopped digging. Its massive head swung toward the trees, nostrils flaring. For the first time, fear flickered in its small, dark eyes. Then they came. Dozens. Hundreds. Pouring from the undergrowth like a living flood, Megalania, giant monitor lizards, each the size of a wolf. Their forked tongues tasted the air, their yellow eyes locking onto the sloth. These weren't ordinary predators. They hunted in packs. And they remembered. The Megatherium roared, rising onto its hind legs, making itself look even bigger. It swung its claws in warning, but the lizards didn't back down. One darted forward, lightning fast, sinking its teeth into the sloth's leg before scrambling away. The wound sizzled. Venom. The sloth bellowed in pain, swiping wildly, but the Megalania were too quick. They struck like arrows. Bite, retreat, bite again. Each puncture left a trickle of dark blood. The sloth's movement slowed. Its breath came in ragged gasps. Then, the alpha Megalania struck. It launched itself onto the sloth's back, jaws clamping onto its neck. The others surged forward, a writhing mass of scales and teeth. The Megatherium staggered, then collapsed, shaking the ground. The lizards didn't kill it immediately. They waited, letting the venom do its work. But they weren't alone. From the treetops, shadows dropped. Argentavis, the largest flying birds to ever exist, their wingspans wider than a giraffe was tall. They didn't attack the lizards. They went for the sloth's eyes. The Megalania hissed, twisting to face the new threat. A bird's beak snapped down, crushing a lizard's skull. The swarm scattered, regrouping. The Argentavis shrieked, their cries piercing the night. And then, a new tremor. Not from the ground. From the sky. The Argentavis let out panicked screeches, their massive wings beating frantically as they abandoned their meal. The Megalania froze, their forked tongues flicking nervously. Even in their venom-induced frenzy, they sensed it. Something was coming. Something that made even the kings of this ancient world flee. Then the wind changed. A shadow passed over the moon. Not a cloud, but something alive. Something enormous. The trees bent under a sudden gust, leaves tearing from branches. The Megalania scattered, their hisses fading into the undergrowth. Only the dying Megatherium remained, its labored breaths growing weaker. Then, silence. A pair of wings, leathery and vast, blotted out the stars. Quetzalcoatlus, the largest flying creature to ever exist, glided down like a living storm. Its beak alone was longer than a man, its eyes dark and calculating. It didn't land. It hovered, the downdraft from its wings flattening the grass in rippling waves. The Megatherium tried to roar, but only a weak gurgle escaped. The Quetzalcoatlus tilted its head, studying the sloth with cold curiosity. This wasn't hunger. This was something else. With a sudden, terrifying precision, it struck. Its beak snapped shut around the Megatherium's skull, crushing bone with a single bite. The sloth's body twitched once, then went still. The Quetzalcoatlus didn't eat. It released the carcass, letting it thud to the ground. Then it turned its gaze upward, as if listening. A distant rumble answered. Not thunder. Not an earthquake. Wings. More of them. The Quetzalcoatlus let out a sound like tearing metal, a call, or a warning. It launched itself into the air, just as the treetops exploded. 3 more of its kind descended, their shadows swallowing the land below. They circled the clearing, their movements synchronized, deliberate. Then, the first Quetzalcoatlus did something unexpected. It vomited. A thick, black sludge splattered across the ground, steaming where it touched the grass. The others followed suit, their bellies convulsing as they emptied their stomachs onto the earth. The substance bubbled, spreading like oil. Then it moved. Tendrils of black writhed from the sludge, creeping toward the megatherium's body. Where they touched flesh, the corpse dissolved, melting into a thick, dark liquid. The Quetzalcoatlus watched, unblinking, as their creation consumed the sloth. This wasn't hunting. This was farming. The black sludge pulsed like a living thing, tendrils coiling around the megatherium's remains. Bones cracked and reshaped. Muscle fibers twisted and regrew. The very air smelled of lightning and rotting leaves, the scent of something unnatural being born. From the bubbling pool of darkness, a shape emerged. At first it looked like the sloth, same massive frame, same curved claws. But then it stood, its back legs straightening in a way no ground sloth ever could. Its fur sloughed off in wet clumps, revealing mottled gray skin beneath. The head was all wrong. The jaw unhinged too wide, the teeth too sharp, the eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The Quetzalcoatlus circled above, their wing beats stirring the toxic mist rising from the pool. They watched with what might have been satisfaction as their creation took its first shuddering breath. The creature that was once a sloth turned its too long neck toward the jungle. It sniffed the air. Then it screamed, a sound that wasn't animal or bird, but something in between. Somewhere deep in the forest, something screamed back. The Megalania lizards, hidden in the undergrowth, suddenly found themselves the hunted. The transformed sloth moved with terrifying speed, its claws slicing through the night. One lizard barely had time to hiss before its head was torn clean off. The others scattered, but the creature anticipated every move. It didn't just kill them. It played with them. High above, the Quetzalcoatlus began their strange ritual again, regurgitating more of the black substance onto the fresh lizard corpses. The pool expanded, its dark surface rippling with unseen movement. Then came the worst part. The transformed sloth stopped its slaughter and crouched near the growing pool. Its body convulsed, ribs cracking as its chest cavity expanded. With a wet, tearing sound, its mouth opened far too wide, and it began vomiting the same black ooze that had created it. The cycle continued. Dawn light crept through the jungle canopy, painting the black pool with sickly yellow streaks. The transformed sloth creature stood motionless at the water's edge, its grotesque form reflected in the bubbling ooze. The Quetzalcoatlus had departed with first light, their work apparently complete, for now. A new sound broke the morning stillness, the gurgling of the nearby river as it swallowed the spreading edges of the black pool. The sludge resisted at first, clinging to the bank with grasping tendrils, but the current proved stronger. Threads of darkness unraveled into the water, twisting like living ink through the clear flow. Downstream, life continued unaware. A herd of Macrauchenia, strange camel-like creatures with trunk-like noses, drank peacefully at a wide bend in the river. The youngest of the group, barely a month old, waded in up to its knees, playfully splashing at dragonflies. Then it paused, nostrils flaring at something in the water. Before its mother could react, the calf took an experimental lick of the strangely shimmering surface. The effect was immediate. The young Macrauchenia convulsed, its legs buckling as its skin rippled unnaturally. The herd scattered in panic as the calf's screams turned guttural, its body elongating, its mouth splitting vertically in a grotesque parody of its former face. The mother charged forward in protective fury, only to be impaled by her offspring's newly formed bone spikes. By midday, the entire bend in the river ran black. The transformed Macrauchenia moved with eerie coordination, herding their uninfected kin into the tainted waters. Those that resisted were torn apart, their blood only accelerating the transformation of the river. The current carried the corruption farther downstream, toward the wetlands where flocks of terror birds hunted. The massive, flightless predators noticed the change too late. Their watering holes already shimmered with unnatural rainbows. As the first terror bird dipped its beak to drink, its crest feathers began molting in clumps, revealing pulsating flesh beneath. The river's corruption spread like a living nightmare, twisting through every tributary and watering hole. By dusk, the jungle had become a battleground between what was natural and what had been changed. Near the riverbank, a pack of Thylacosmolus, marsupial saber-tooths, prowled cautiously. Their leader, an old female, missing one ear, sniffed at the water's edge. The liquid here was still clear, but the scent carried downstream made her fur bristle. She growled low in her throat, a warning. The pack retreated into the trees, abandoning their hunt. They weren't the only ones. Birds fell silent. Insects stopped humming. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, movement. From the tainted waters, shapes emerged. The terror birds had changed. Their once powerful legs now ended in hooked talons that clicked against stone. Their beaks had split vertically, revealing rows of needle teeth. But the most horrifying change was their intelligence. They moved with purpose, fanning out in formation, herding prey toward the infected waters. The Thylacosmolus pack watched from the shadows as the birds cornered a group of Toxodon, massive, hippo-like grazers. Normally, the lumbering beasts would have been safe from avian predators. But these were no ordinary hunters. One Toxodon bellowed as a transformed terror bird leaped onto its back, talons digging deep. The others panicked, stampeding, right into the blackened river. The water churned as the infection took hold. Bones cracked. Flesh writhed. Within minutes, the Toxodon rose again, their bodies elongated, mouths splitting into gaping maws. The Thylacosmolus leader knew they couldn't fight this. She signaled retreat, but it was too late. From the treetops, changed monkeys dropped like living rain. Once fruit eaters, they now bore serrated claws and too many joints in their limbs. They moved silently, surrounding the saber-tooths. The pack snarled, fangs bared, but the monkeys didn't attack. They waited, because something bigger was coming. The ground trembled, trees splintered, and from the depths of the corrupted jungle, the first of the Megatherium abominations emerged. No longer just one, but many. Their bodies had continued mutating, growing armored plates and whip-like tails. And they weren't alone. The river had reached the coast, and the things that lived in the deep ocean were waking up. The ocean had always been the Earth's oldest, most untamed frontier. Now, it became the birthplace of nightmares. Moonlight shimmered on the waves as the first black tendrils of corruption reached the shallows. Fish darted away instinctively, but the infection moved faster. A school of Xiphactinus, predatory fish as long as canoes, thrashed violently as the dark water touched their scales. Their bodies twisted mid-swim, jaws unhinging to reveal rows of backward-curving teeth. Their eyes clouded over white, yet somehow, they could still see. Deeper down, where sunlight never reached, something far worse stirred. A megalodon, ancient ruler of the depths, sensed the change in the water. The great shark turned away from the contamination, only to find itself surrounded by its own kind. But these were no longer sharks. Their flesh had turned translucent, revealing pulsing black veins beneath. Their mouths no longer had teeth, just endless, spiraling throats. The megalodon tried to flee, but the infected sharks moved with unnatural coordination. They didn't attack. They herded, driving the last untainted predator toward a massive underwater structure it hadn't noticed before, a towering spire of coral, bone, and calcified flesh that hadn't been there yesterday. The spire pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Meanwhile, on land, the jungle had become a factory of horrors. The transformed Megatherium worked methodically, their clawed hands weaving trees together with strands of black ooze. The trees themselves were changing, their bark splitting to reveal vein-like networks beneath. Somewhere in the center of this living construction, a pit had been dug, a perfect circle descending into darkness. The terror birds stood guard around its edges, their new, elongated necks swaying in unison. Every so often, they would tilt their heads skyward as if listening to some silent command. Then, movement in the pit. Something was climbing out. Not an animal, not a plant, but something that might have been both once. Its segmented body glistened with mucus, its countless legs clicking against the stone. It had no eyes, yet it saw. It had no mouth, yet it hungered. And it was only the first. The thing from the pit unfolded itself like a nightmare given form. Its segmented body pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, casting sickly green light across the mutated jungle. The transformed animals froze in unison, their heads snapping toward it, as if hearing some silent command. Then the connection began. Tendrils of black ooze erupted from the pit, latching onto the nearest creatures, a Megatherium abomination, 3 terror birds, and a cluster of the monkey-like horrors. The victims convulsed violently as the tendrils burrowed into their flesh. Their eyes rolled back, their limbs twitching in perfect synchronization. When they moved again, it was with one purpose. The jungle itself seemed to breathe as the hive mind took control. Trees bent unnaturally, their branches weaving together to form archways that pulsed with vein-like strands. The river reversed its flow, black water surging backward to fill the pit until it overflowed in a cascading waterfall of corruption. But the most terrifying change was in the animals themselves. The infected megalodon from the deep emerged at the river's mouth. Their translucent bodies now fused together into a single, serpentine horror that slithered onto land. The shark beast dragged itself toward the pit, its maw gaping open to reveal not teeth, but hundreds of writhing, finger-like appendages. From the sky, the Quetzalcoatlus returned. Only now their wings had elongated into grotesque, membrane-thin sails that caught the wind unnaturally. They circled above the pit in a perfect spiral, their shrieks forming a haunting melody that made the very air vibrate. Then, silence. The hive mind had finished preparing. The pit's depths began to glow. The glowing pit pulsed like a monstrous heart, its rhythm speeding up with each passing second. The blackened trees surrounding it trembled, their roots pulling free from the earth as if drawn toward the light. Even the air felt heavier, thicker, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. Then the sound began. Not a roar, not a screech, but something deeper, older, a vibration that traveled through bone rather than air. The remaining uninfected animals within miles collapsed instantly, their bodies spasming as the frequency rattled their nervous systems. Birds fell from the sky mid-flight. Insects dropped dead in swarms. Even the mighty Argentavis, still untouched by the corruption, crashed through the canopy with glassy eyes and broken wings. The hive-minded creatures didn't react. They stood motionless, their bodies angled toward the pit as if awaiting orders. Then, movement in the depths. Something was rising. Not another twisted beast. Not another tendril of ooze. This was different. A shape emerged, smooth, reflective, and utterly alien. A structure that looked less like a living thing and more like a machine grown from bone and chitin. Its surface rippled with shifting patterns, reacting to the hive mind's presence. The fused megalodon abomination lurched forward, its writhing mouth tendrils extending toward the structure. Where they made contact, the machine's surface opened, revealing a hollow interior filled with swirling black mist. The hive mind had found what it was searching for, a doorway. And on the other side, something stirred. The jungle air crackled with unnatural energy as the bone machine hummed to life. Its surface pulsed like a living thing, veins of blue-black light spreading across its structure in intricate patterns. The fused megalodon abomination remained motionless, its tendrils fused to the machine's surface, a grotesque bridge between two worlds. Then the ground screamed. Great fissures split the earth, not randomly, but in precise geometric patterns. Trees toppled into the cracks, their roots snapping like gunshots. The river reversed course again, black water rushing uphill to pour into the glowing pit. Even the clouds above swirled into an impossible spiral, drawn toward the unfolding nightmare below. The hive-minded creatures began moving with new urgency. The megatherium abominations used their massive claws to carve symbols into the exposed bedrock, symbols that burned with the same eerie light as the machine. The monkey horrors scaled the remaining trees, weaving their own bodies into the branches to form living antennae that thrummed with energy. Then came the most terrifying change yet. The air above the pit ripped, not like wind, not like heat distortion, but like reality itself was being peeled back. Through the tear, glimpses of something vast moved, shapes too large, too wrong to fully comprehend. The tear widened with a sound like breaking glass, and the first tendril emerged. This wasn't like the black ooze. This was something older, something that made the transformed jungle creatures seem harmless by comparison. Where it touched the machine, the bone structure screamed, an actual, pained sound that shook the earth. The fused megalodon convulsed violently, its body splitting apart as the tendril absorbed it effortlessly. The hive mind had made a fatal miscalculation. It hadn't opened a door. It had rung a dinner bell. The tear in reality widened with a sound like tearing flesh. The jungle's mutated creatures froze mid-movement, their hive minds suddenly overwhelmed by a presence far older and hungrier than their own. The bone machine shuddered violently, its carefully constructed patterns fracturing under the strain. Then it emerged. Not fully, not yet, but enough to change everything. A single massive eye peered through the rift, its pupil a swirling vortex of black and violet. Where its gaze fell, the air itself crystallized into jagged, glass-like shards that hovered unnaturally. The mutated megatherium closest to the rift let out a wet gurgle as its body began unwinding, flesh peeling back in spirals, bones elongating into grotesque sculptures that defied anatomy. The hive mind fought back. The Quetzalcoatlus dive-bombed the eye, their talons outstretched, only to freeze mid-air as the pupil dilated slightly. One by one, their bodies folded inward, bones crunching as they compressed into perfect spheres of flesh and feather that hovered for a moment before dissolving into mist. The machine was failing. The bone structure cracked down the middle, its light flickering erratically. The remaining creatures, monkey horrors, terror birds, even the shark abomination, turned on each other in sudden, violent frenzy. The hive connection was breaking. They were no longer unified. They were prey again, and the eye was hungry. The rift pulsed, stretching wider. More eyes appeared behind the first. Something vast shifted in the darkness beyond, its movements sending tremors through the earth. The last surviving megatherium let out a final, defiant roar, just as the ground beneath it opened like a mouth. The ground yawned open, revealing rows of jagged, stone-like teeth lining the chasm. The surviving creatures, now free from the hive mind's control, scrambled back in primal terror. The megatherium abomination barely avoided the snapping earth, its mutated claws digging furrows into the soil as it fled. But there was nowhere to run. The jungle itself was alive. Trees uprooted themselves, their roots knotting into grasping limbs. Vines lashed out like whips, wrapping around fleeing animals and dragging them toward the growing rift. The river water thickened into a gelatinous mass, trapping anything that touched it in a suffocating embrace. The terror birds, their twisted bodies now working against them, shrieked as the ground beneath their feet softened like quicksand. One by one, they sank, their final cries cut short as the earth swallowed them whole. Then, the eyes blinked. All at once, the jungle fell silent. Even the wind stilled. The remaining creatures, a handful of Thylacosmolus, a wounded Argentavis, the last megatherium, stood frozen, their instincts screaming that movement meant death. The rift pulsed at a soundless command rippled through the air. And from the shadows of the trees, the first victims of the corruption emerged, not as mindless horrors, but as something worse. Their bodies had been hollowed out, their flesh replaced with swirling darkness that held their shapes together. They moved with eerie grace, their empty eyes fixed on the survivors. They weren't here to kill. They were here to collect. The megatherium roared, swinging its claws in a desperate arc, but they passed right through the nearest hollow creature. Its body dissolved into smoke, then reformed behind the sloth, its clawed hands closing around its throat. The Argentavis took to the air, its wings beating frantically, only for the sky itself to tear open above it. Something long and segmented shot out, wrapping around the bird's body and yanking it into the void. The Thylacosmolus pack backed into a tight circle, their fangs bared, but the hollow creatures didn't attack. They simply waited, because the real predator was finally here, and it was hungry. The hollow creatures parted like a dark tide as the ground began to bubble. A viscous, silver-black liquid oozed from the cracks, forming into shapes that defied nature. Limbs that were both liquid and solid, eyes that blinked in and out of existence, mouths that formed only to dissolve again. The last surviving animals, the Thylacosmolus pack, backed away, their instincts torn between fight and flight. Then the pool spoke, not in sounds, not in words, but in memories. The saber-toothed marsupials froze as visions flooded their minds. The scent of their first hunt, the warmth of siblings long dead, the taste of water from a forgotten river. The images came faster, sharper, until they weren't just memories anymore. They were promises. One young male, his fur streaked with scars, took a hesitant step forward. His pack snarled warnings, but the liquid shapes beckoned. The silver-black tendrils caressed his muzzle, and where they touched, his body began to change. His bones elongated. His claws retracted into smooth, almost human-like hands. His tail shriveled away as he rose onto two legs. When he opened his eyes again, they shone with terrible understanding. He was no longer Thylacosmolus. He was something new. His former packmates hissed, backing away, but it was too late. The transformed creature moved with unnatural grace, his fingers brushing each of their foreheads in turn. One by one, they fell silent, their bodies convulsing as the change took them too. Above them, the rift in reality pulsed hungrily. The hollow creatures knelt in unison as the last natural animals on the continent became something else. Something better. The silver pool rippled approvingly. It had found what it came for. The transformed Thylacosmolus stood motionless as the silver-black liquid seeped back into the earth. The jungle fell eerily quiet. No more screeching birds, no rustling of predators in the undergrowth. Only the whisper of wind through mutated trees remained. Then, one by one, the evolved creatures lifted their heads. Their glowing eyes locked onto the horizon, where untouched lands waited. They didn't need words. The purpose burned in their blood: adapt, spread, improve. But as they took their first steps forward, the ground trembled, not from the rift, but from something deeper. The silver pool bubbled violently before suddenly retreating, draining into the fissures like water down a throat. The hollow creatures collapsed into dust. The bow machine crumbled. Even the rift in the sky stitched itself closed with a sound like a sigh. The evolved pack froze. The lesson was clear. The force behind the corruption had gotten what it wanted, a species worthy of the new world. Now, the test truly began. Could they survive without their creator's influence? Could they build instead of destroy? The lead creature looked down at his clawed hands, no longer tools for killing, but for shaping. Around him, the jungle's mutations were already fading, the black ooze dissolving into harmless soil. The river ran clear again. Somewhere in the distance, an uninfected bird sang. Moral lesson: true evolution isn't just survival. It's learning to thrive without becoming a monster.